So today we talk about GMO, and I am not really an expert because I am an expert in the risk assessment. I am not so deeply expert in GMO. I don't know how many people are so deeply expert in GMO. But why GMO in this exposition? Because I mean it's so relevant for the food security. It's more than 20 years. With stigmatism, as Klaus said before, or without stigmatism, we are talking about GMO because they are necessary for the food security. And the exposition is really the best place for talking about. So we don't want to talk about pros and cons of GMOs today, but we want just to follow up in a most in very simple way what GMO means, what science can say about GMO, where we are with the science, and what science can do and can be productive for the society in the next time. So first of all, thank you very much for staying here. You can also stand up. You be very confident. This is an informal event. You can also follow up also your feeding here with this buffet. And I just passed the microphone to Piero and to Stefan that as very good friends, in front of one glass of wine, where is your wine? they will just start a simple discussion for simple consumer and interested in the issue of GMOs. So thank you very much for coming, for staying here anyway.
Do we need to hold two microphones at a time, or?
Yeah, because I mean we need.
One is for registering.
We want to be very transparent anyway.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. I'll do my best. So thanks, first of all, to the organization for inviting me. Probably they didn't find anybody else during vacation time, and so I'm here as a sort of last minute call. So my role here is a provocateur, and my wife, if my wife were sitting in the audience, she would say, "This is the role for you." So I honestly going to ask three basic questions. I feel very deeply about them. They are made not as a provocateur in the bad sense, but in the good sense, to ask for something, to provocate, to the vocation is something that you are called for. Okay, so the first question concerns the past experience and the future research. Since the PreSto was devoted to understand what are we going to ask, what is the next research on GMOs, the starting point is that we have already 30 years of accumulated experience and 20 years of safe commercial deployment for this technology. And one example is the BT corn, that people who know about agronomy know that there are insects biting into corn. These are pictures taken by myself. And once they bite into the cob, it is much more easy for fungi to grow and produce mycotoxins. So we know there are problems with agriculture now, for instance, in the Po Valley, but in many other maize growing areas, and is that mycotoxins are cause for a source of problems, mainly for animals, since maize is given to animals, but also for humans. And I'm not going to explain all the details, but the science on the mycotoxin, on this mycotoxin, is very clear. Mycotoxin blocks the entry of folic acid into the cell, and this means that the lack of folic acid is very damaging, especially for childbirth. And there are places in the world that experience very high numbers of neural tube defects in the development, because the neural tube, the tube that gives rise to the spinal cord and the head, have very high numbers of these defects. And I give you some example of these defects. These are three examples from Guatemala. Guatemala is one of the hot spots. And the reason is that there is a massive evidence that Fumonis in this sort of mycotoxin causes spinal tube defects, these neural tube defects. So, and there is also a lot of more evidence from real life situation from Spain, where the conventional maize, a part of the conventional maize is recalled from the market because of high fumonisin content. And organic maize is even more likely to get recalled because organic maize has usually a higher content of these fumonisins, these mycotoxins. But we know that BT corn, despite being around 20 to 30% on the market, depending on the year, is not being recalled at all. So this is part of the accumulated experience. We know, for instance, I'm going to skip. We know, for instance, so the question is, based on this accumulated experience, for instance, I mentioned BT corn, the question is it not time to ask for a less stringent oversight, at least, for instance, for those cases that are proven to be relatively safe, for instance, BT corn or generally the BT technology. So is it not time to ask for a less stringent oversight? This is my first question.
Okay, thank you, Piero, for that provocative question. And since we are in an informal Caffe Expo, I think I can safely say what I feel about this question. I totally agree with you. Do I? Okay. Oh, this is one. This is two. Okay. Okay. I totally agree, because what I've said in the previous talk is that we need to make better use of what we know, and there are things that we know, and you've shown that for this specific example. That is one clear example where there might be a benefit of using certain things that we are not using right now. This also goes in the direction that we've been discussing, that you need to look at the trait, you need to look at the product, you need to look at the system that you are working in. And a GMO or GM is only a technology, it's a tool that can give you certain things that you can use. It's a bit like a knife. You can use a knife to make this delicious food that is prepared here for our guests, but you can also use a knife to stab somebody to death. And we don't forbid knife because people do that and people keep doing it. I don't know how many people in Italy are stabbed to death. I know there are some people in Germany that are stabbed to death. And so GMO is also only a tool that can be used to achieve certain things. And if we can have a product that addresses a certain need, that solves a certain challenge that we have, then go for it if it's safe. And I think the BT case is one where we see that there's a lot of data showing that that is safe to consume for animals, for human beings, and that is no overdue harm to the environment in comparison to the other options that we have, like spraying insecticides. I mean, the discussion on insecticides is quite heavily being made in Europe. And so, yes, I agree. Totally.
Thank you very much for your honest reply. I'm going to present the second. The second question refers to traits. I apologize, this is not the last version of the presentation, but we had some technical problems, mainly due to my fault, to my shortcomings. But the point is that there are certain traits, certain characters, like for instance herbicide resistance, that are caused by some genetic changes. In this case, for instance, is the resistance to a certain class of herbicide is a change in this gene that makes this transition. It's not important. And we know exactly what are the genetic changes and what the resultant resistance to the specific herbicide. We know a lot about this. So the point is that there are now in cultivation in Europe and in many other countries, many crops which are resistant to herbicides. But these are not transgenic ones, are not so-called GMOs. By the way, I hate the term GMOs because I find it not precise enough. Anyway, let's go back. There are several crops which are resistant to herbicides in cultivation now, but nobody gives a damn about it. And we know that these have genetic changes that made them resistant. For instance, sunflower is a spontaneous mutation. Rice was an induced mutation, and so on. We could go at length and describe for each one of these. This is the sunflower, which is cultivated now in Europe. It's something like 5 million hectares cultivated with varieties resistant, tolerant to this sort of herbicides. And then also in Italy, if you go 20 kilometers from the Expo site, you will find plenty of rice tolerant to herbicides. Yeah? It's something like 75,000 hectares grown in Italy now. So the point is, gene flow is taking place now also in Italy. There are scientific reports that tell us that there is gene flow. Why is nobody taking care? I mean, I would like to explain the dangers of gene flow and why it's not a dangerous for the environment, but rather for the agronomical side. But it's not time to. My question is, will future research be more interested in the traits rather than in the process? And this is, can be explained more in detail by Klaus. And just a note before I leave the microphone to Stefan. Please, that I am not advocating a stringent regulation for non-transgenic crops, but rather regulation proportionate to risk. So, is it the question clear to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think you are addressing the question to the wrong people, because research is always interested in the trait and not how it is done. I mean, you want to have an effect in the environment, in the ecosystem, on the field. You want to have the thing doing something. I mean, there's a reason why they make it herbicide resistant, because they want to have it herbicide resistant. So it's not about how you achieve that, it's about the plant being herbicide resistant. So for science, the trait is always in the focus. The regulators are the ones that are interested in the process or the trait, and they are the ones that need to change their view on the things. Again, I totally agree. The problem, I think the discussion is being had in the wrong kind of argumentative logic. What we want to have is, we want to protect something. We want to protect, I don't know, the wild rice in its form because it's a precious genetic resource, or because we want to protect the environment, some species that is very nice to see. We don't want that to decline and to die out. So, and for that species, or for that thing that we want to protect, there are certain dangers, there are certain risks which it is exposed to. And those risks can come from many different sources. Those can be GM, but they can of course be non-GM. And if we really value that protection goal, we need to protect it, no matter where this risk comes from. And not only GMOs, and this is, I think, what you're saying basically, that we are singling out GMOs and not looking at the other risks, which is totally true. We have performed experiments on butterflies, which are at risk from Bt maize because of the protein that in the Bt maize that is toxic against the butterflies. And we've tried to look at what is the actual risk of a population of butterflies in a region in Germany where maize is cultivated, in comparison to what farmers do, mow the strips along the fields where the butterfly larvae are occurring on nettles. And of course, if a farmer goes there and mows everything away, when the larvae are there, you've got mortality rates of like 100%. And the few pollen grains from the Bt maize, they are nothing in comparison. And so you have this protection goal, being the butterfly species, being wiped out by something that farmers say, oh, I need to do it because otherwise it looks ugly. Yeah? And then you have this Bt plant where people cry wolf about, although it doesn't really add anything to the risk that is already there. I totally agree with you on that. We need to look at what are the things that we want to protect, what are the things that we want to achieve, and then asking the question, is something that we do relevant to that? And then regulating proportional to the risk, proportional to the hazard that might be coming from that. and that should not prejudge one tool against the other or one way of management against the other. That's correct, yeah.
I'm from the European Food Safety Authority, and we do the risk assessment for the GMOs. So one thing I would not agree with what you have been talking about, that only the trait should be looked at. And I suppose that means you have a herbicide-tolerant plant, so you would only look at herbicide tolerance. I think it's very important to know how this was achieved, and the reason for that is that there can be side effects. And if you know what was done to the plant, then you can also form a rational hypothesis on side effects. And in particular, on herbicide-tolerant plants, there are so many different ways on how you can generate them. You have listed a couple of them, but others that use transgenic means are you take different enzymes, put them into the plant. And of course, these enzymes will work as the trait to confer the herbicide tolerance, but they can also have an impact on the metabolism of the plant. And this should be looked at. And we have had examples where indeed there were substances produced in the plant that needed a separate risk assessment. We have published opinions on that. So I don't want to say that only transgenic plants should be looked at. I have no opinion on that. Please note that, because this is out of the EFSA remit. But I think you should know how the trait was generated, what is the mechanism behind that, so that you can have a rational idea to look at side effects also. Yeah.
But just for my own better understanding of that issue, for a mutagenized plant that has undergone mutagenetic treatment with radiation or with colchicine or whatever, do people actually look at the other 1,000, 2,000 mutations that occurred in the genome and the potential impact of that? I mean, they go through regulatory processes for conventional plants, of course. They are tested and stuff like that, but they don't look at, secondary plant metabolites in so much detail. So that a lot could go through in conventional plant breeding that people don't care about, or which they don't look at. Isn't that correct?
I think I was careful to mention that I don't want to comment on that particular side. Yeah. But I do think you cannot look at the trait only. That was my point here, yeah? Yeah? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, first, I want to say about the maize and the fumonisins or whatever other mycotoxins. It depends heavily on the storage quality. And in Africa and Guatemala, it's a catastrophe. In Europe, it's no problem. So the difference between BT and non-BT maize regarding the mycotoxins in Europe is minimal, so can be disregarded. Well, more or less, yeah. But for regulators in developing countries who still do not change to the BT maize, they are just idiots in my eyes.
Well, coming back to the maize and that little pest that we have associated with it, maybe it's worth a while looking into where we got that from, because from what I have been told is that it mostly happens when you do not change the crops. You just do corn all the time, all the time, all the time. Now, why do we do corn all the time, all the time, all the time? We need to feed our meat consumption. So that's kind of getting back to what I was saying before, there's a whole system involved.
Yeah, the pictures I was showing and most of the data about fumonisin effects come from third world countries. So it's not to feed meat for meat consumption. Yeah. Well, of every issue, of course.
Yeah, but there's some truth. I mean, that's a valid argument. I mean, a lot of things go wrong in agriculture. I mean, if you walk around Expo, you can probably get a good idea of what those kinds of things are. What I think is that trying to change the system is a good idea, but that takes time. If you talk about Africa and other developing countries building up infrastructure, making sure that people get access to land, that they actually have courts that they can go to if their rights have been violated. That takes time. We should do that, but we should, doing that, we should not neglect short-term solutions to certain challenges. Of course, on the other hand, if you have a short-term solution, you can say, oh, well, now I have some more time to solve the big problem and I'm not under too much pressure. You know, it's a bit like what's going on with Greece. You know, we are now giving them money, but we are not really solving the real problem that they're having. And we are now buying time only. And maybe it's the same thing, you know. We have so many things that need to change fundamentally in the way we do agriculture. And of course, GM will not solve that. But this can be a solution that can work for some time and alleviate impacts while we are working on the longer term perspective of changing the system. That's my opinion.
But you know, even the big devil Monsanto is propagating crop rotation since many years, and in many cases unsuccessful because the farmers have too much to gain from monocultures. But it's not this old enemy scheme. Here is the industry and monoculture, and here are the poor farmers who suffer from monoculture. That's a mixed hat, I tell you. It's a mixed bag.
Okay. So, question 3 is, which relates a lot about the thing you presented in the previous presentations in the European Pavilion. So, research and policy are focusing on risk, and you said that many experts claim that the discussion on risk was overwhelming more than those on benefits. Yeah? And my issue is that research needs to be more realistic, yeah? And also to be comparative. Is this approach better than the other? Not just is GMO risky? Because in that case, you will always find something to claim. And just to show the difference, the way GMOs are treated, again, I told you I hate the word GMOs, but everybody understands. This is the amount of paperwork needed to get the approval for a canola variety, conventional breeding. This is the paperwork needed to get approval for a canola variety, same trait, but produced through transgenesis, a so-called GMO. Sorry? It's much more, okay. That was 20 years ago in Canada, so maybe now the thing got just worse. Yeah? So you can immediately understand that most university will be removed from competition. There is no university which is going to fund any research which will need to produce this amount of paperwork. It will cost 20, 30, 40 million euros, and my university will never pour that money into a project of that sort. So, and just to make a step back, this is a wild cereal, like this one. This is oat, avena in Italy. This is wild oat, this is cultivated oat. And the main difference between the two species, it's the same species. The main difference is that this one, the seed is gone, while in this one, the seed is still there. And the same is true for this one. This is a wild cereal I collected here in Expo. If you touch it, the seed will start to drop out, even if not, they are not entirely mature. So the point is that now we know a lot about the difference. And the difference in the case, for instance, of rice is this one. This is one gene out of 30,000 genes, and this single gene was mutated in this point. It's just one nucleotide. You change one nucleotide in a whole rice plant, and you change the reproduction in a way, it's a revolution. Because before, the plant could live by itself in nature, disperse the seed and reproduce each year. Now the plant is dependent on human activity that removes the seed at the correct season and places it back into the ground at the next season. So I would like to claim that nobody can object that this is genetic modification. This is genetic modification, and nobody can claim the contrary. So And I could tell you more examples like this. This is seed dormancy, another trait typical of domestication, of making plants domestic, close to humans. This is the sort of wild rice. This is more domesticated rice. The domesticated rice sprouts immediately. The seed germinates very quickly. And I have no time to explain and show the genetic modification behind this. So the crucial point is the domestication is genetic modification, depends heavily, is intertwined with genetic modification. Of course, I mean genetic modification in the broad sense, in the real linguistic sense. So one thing scientists forget, and surely most of the people, of lay people forget, is that the domestication is a double course, is a maledizione course, because the seeds will germinate at the wrong time, even if they fall onto the ground, and there will be crowding and competition. This is a maize cob, which dropped to the ground during harvest, and it was a rainy October. There was plenty of rain. The seed did germinate. These are all seedlings of maize germinating. This will die in a few days because November will come, the cold will come, cold will kill all the plants. So this, the domestication means plants are unable to survive in the wild. The crop plants are fruits of human ingenuity. Well, I'm of course pushing it to the extent. For maize, it will be true. In our climate, it will be true. For other plants, they would be able to survive, for instance, sunflower, rapeseed, and so on. But in the average, crop plants are very weak. And spontaneous survival, this is a picture taken very close to Calliera's home. It's Borgo Franco di Ivrea. There was one maize plant in a whole soybean field. The survival rate of maize in our climate is close to 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000. And this means that the spontaneous transition of crop plants is for a field will turn into wild areas very easily. The other transition will be very, very difficult, and you need a lot of technology and a lot of time to do this. So my question is, how are risks balanced with benefits in research? If we insist on the risks, when the risk, we know the environmental risks from crop plants, for that reason I explained, are usually minute, are very small. It is agriculture per se which is damaging the environment, but we have to live with this. So this is your question, Stefan.
That's the toughest question for the end. Risk is a very personal thing, and it very much depends on, well, basically what you are willing to risk and what kind of probability you are accepting as, okay, I can live with that. And weighing that against the benefits is also difficult, because you need to weigh this benefit for yourself and compare it to the risk. And I think the problem is that for a lot of GMOs that we currently have, people don't see their own personal benefit. Somebody may benefit, and most people fear it's only the companies that benefit, which isn't always true. In many cases, or in most cases, the farmers benefit more than the companies do. But still, it's a farmer, it's not me. And what do I care if he gets, at the end of the year, 10,000 euros more or not? That's not my, I have nothing in this at stake in this thing. But I'm supposed to eat that and potentially suffer a risk, So he's benefiting, I'm having the risk. That's not acceptable for many people. And what kind of level of risk and what kind of severity of outcome people are willing to accept, that ranges from individual to individual. I mean, a very easy example, I was hiking with a friend of mine in Germany in the Thuringian forest, and we wanted to go to the top of a mountain, like 980 meters or something, to have a good view and camp for the night and stuff. But we knew that a lightning storm was coming, but we didn't know where exactly it would be coming through. As it so happened, it went right cross by us. It's like I counted like 1 second between the lightning strike and the thunder coming. So it was really above us. So we ran the risk of being hit by lightning on the top of a mountain in the forest, which is a very silly idea of doing. Yeah? And I know that it's very silly. But still, we took the risk because we thought, what's the probability of that happening? Other people would have said, you're totally crazy of doing that, but we did. And it's the same thing with GMOs. People see a risk, or they perceive a risk, which might be real, which might be unreal, but they perceive it as real, and that influences their view of is that a good thing or is that not a good thing? And that's very, very, very tricky. I think research is of course looking also on the benefits, because people wouldn't develop plants varieties either with GM technology or with another technology if they wouldn't see a benefit in doing that, because otherwise people wouldn't use it. Who would use something that is risky but doesn't yield a benefit? The kind of research that has been funded by member states that we've been showing in our project is risk related, because that is what people are asking. People are not asking, does it have a benefit for me or the farmer or the environment? They're asking, is it risky for me or the animal that I'm eating or for somebody else? So by giving that question, researchers of course go for the money and then do this kind of research. If people have said we need to look for the benefits, research would have written proposals addressing benefits. We need to look more on the benefits. I think that's one of the outcomes of our project, because we have looked a lot at risks. But when you look at the benefits, it's a question of how do you weigh risks and benefits. And we know everything we do has risks, and we need to weigh it. And you do that every day unconsciously, more or less. And then also other science can come in, and that's something that you've alluded to, trying to understand why is it that people say, fuck that risk, I'd rather go for the benefit, I don't have an answer to that, because I'm not a neuropsychologist or behavioral scientist. I have no idea why I went up that mountain taking the risk of being hit by lightning. I don't know. I just did it. And that's I think is the more important question. Do we get an understanding of why people choose to take an action or to be inactive? Because being inactive also has risks. I mean, BT maize being cultivated, using insecticides, going for crop rotation may be a financial risk for the farmer, That's a difficult thing, and I don't have an answer to that. But I agree that we need to look at both sides, because if you only look at the benefit side, people would go for crazy stuff which could kill them. And if you only look at the risks, you will basically end up not doing anything, because everything has risks. And if you don't go for the benefits as well, you keep yourself from developing further. You don't change anything. And if we keep the status quo, then we will be ending up in a very bad situation. Of that I'm sure.
Thank you for your answer. I just had one very simple point. You said we need to understand why somebody is taking a risk or not. And I think this has not been explained. The need for developing new crops, new varieties, new technologies, new practices. This has not been explained at all, especially by university. And there is the need for explaining that there are positive sides of developing these things. I think I just come to you. I would suggest that people go one day and do hand weeding a garden or a wheat field, so that they know what means to pull weeds one by one by hand. I usually do it in my garden, in my allotment. I grow some vegetables, and once you do it, you really understand. Especially at the end of the day, if you bend all the day long, then we need to go to present this very simple experience so that the people understand the need for new technologies.
Allora, come rappresentante dei consumatori, io sono la presidente di Piace Cibo Sano, che organizza insieme all'Università Cattolica questi momenti di informazione per rendere più consapevoli i consumatori.
I'm going to translate. So she's one of the organizers, and she's also representative of a consumers union to bring the issues from consumers.
Avrei una domanda da porti, che è quella che normalmente i consumatori sono preoccupati e contrari agli OGM.
I have one question to pose to you, because usually consumers are worried and therefore oppose GMOs.
Non credono che gli OGM possano servire per ridurre i pesticidi o per combattere la fame nel mondo.
They believe GMOs are not there for reducing pesticide use or to reduce hunger in the world.
Allora, io che ho fondato questa associazione insieme a una stretta partnership con l'università, perché credo in una filiera che nasce con la ricerca e finisce col consumatore, avrei bisogno di capire come coinvolgere i consumatori per renderli più consapevoli. Questa domanda vi pongo.
Okay. So she founded this association to involve more the consumers, and she also had she involved the university to, as a sort of all the way through to involve all the actors. So the question is, how can we involve more the consumers to explain more the science to these people?
Come raggiungere le masse dei consumatori? Perché ho apprezzato gli interventi tecnici di ascolto della percezione dei consumatori su metodi Delphi, metodi di open space technology per l'ascolto delle masse. Però come facciamo a superare questo gap che allontana tutta una massa di consumatori che è infinita?
She listened to the presentation about the Delphi and all the exercise and the research, but the question is, how do we reach the mass of consumers who have no way of learning these things? What is the best way to reach them?
Well, I'm not a social scientist and I'm not an expert on those activities, Delphi, open space, and the other things. So I'm a lay person talking to you here, so I don't know. It's not only a question of understanding the science. I think there has research been done showing that people can be very well educated on the subject but still hold a very, very negative view on GMOs. And there's also been research comparing attitudes before and after people have been educated about that issue. And then you observe that people can be even more aggressively against GMOs after they've been informed, and there are others that are more open and say, okay, it's a positive thing. So I don't know what's behind that. I have no idea. So I cannot really say what it would be the best way of making people feel that it is okay to use GMOs. I don't know. Food is a very sensitive issue. Again, if you walk around Expo, there are a lot of many very delicious foods. They look good, they smell good, they taste good, they feel good, or they make you feel good also. They make you also feel you good about yourself because you've made a good choice, an ethical choice. And for many people, GMOs are quite the opposite. Greedy corporations, dangers to the environment, this and that, patents and stuff. I don't know for many of these things why those are so embedded and attached to GMOs in comparison to other technologies. Simple example, smartphone. Who has a smartphone? Everybody does. I think I read somewhere that 80 to 100 patents are on each and every single device. Android is the software that runs on most of them. It's like 80% market share. It's one company. I've got a Windows Phone. I'm one of those few that has like the marginal share product here with 4% market share or something. I don't know. Google. Many people use Google. I use Google myself, although I know what they do with my data. So So the same kind of issue with patents, greedy corporations and stuff, they apply to our Apple smartphones, they apply to Microsoft, they apply to Google. But people don't seem to care, or don't seem to care as much as they do with food and agriculture. Maybe because they value it differently, maybe because they perceive it differently, I have no idea. I'm just speculating. My point is benefit. Benefit might also be a point, yeah, right. They don't see the benefits with the GMOs that they have. They see the benefit with Googling, with using the smartphone. That's a true point, yeah. But what I wanted to say is that I'm not sure that we can actually reach. So you cannot reach everybody. That's not possible. You can reach certain people that are vocal, that are heard, that people trust, and I think you can have them see also other arguments, other sides, and then can, work their magic with the other people. But it may be that we will always have this kind of negativity, distance toward the GMOs, and that we will never be able to change that. I don't know. That may be true. I can't foresee the future or any mechanism of changing that.
Cioè non ci possiamo accontentare di avvicinare solo un piccolo gruppo di consumatori, ma allora farli partecipare non serve, perché per esempio Piace Cibo Sano punta molto sulla consapevolezza, sul creare delle relazioni di partecipazione attiva dei consumatori, perché questo possa modificare la loro consapevolezza. Allora questo non può essere utile? Non serve neanche iniziare con un piccolo gruppo.
So the point is, she's trying to reach at least a small group of consumers. She's working in that direction, but she wants to reach everybody. Is this attempt to reach somebody useful and a sort of anticipation of the larger goal?
Yeah, I think so. First, because you get a better understanding of why people think that way. And then you should never underestimate the impact that a small good deed can have. You know, a small good deed. If I help somebody, if I help an old lady across the street, and somebody observes that, he might be inclined to do it himself or herself the next time when he is encountered in such a situation. That might be true here as well, If people get more relaxed and then they are invited to a party and somebody comes up with some claim which this person now knows is not true, he can get engaged into the conversation and say, well, that's not really how it is in actuality. So starting small, I think, at least if you're effective and you're doing it in a balanced way and showing pros and cons so that people can really make an informed decision, starting with a small group might probably be a better solution. Yeah. Good luck with that. I mean,
So there was one question here.
I have also an answer. I think one simple reason is that the first generation of GMO crops is made for the benefits of the farmers and not the consumers. It will change when the peanut without an allergen is thrown on the market. It will change when better tastes are around. That's the first reason. The second reason why people are jumping on GMOs is because it's something they cannot grasp. It's molecular biology. It's enigmatic. It's not explainable in a way. It's very difficult for a layperson. And the third reason is that we all crave for risks in our safe society. I have lived in Africa and I have seen how they have a completely different perception of risk. So we have a big famine of risks in our safe Western world. And we jump on this because we just love it,
So she would like to thank you, and I join her to thank you that if you, as consumers, we'll start, thank you for your patience, for listening, for discussion, but if you start as consumer to behave, that there will be the so-called snowball effect. That once you convince 10 people, these 10 people will convince more, and so on. We might change the behavior of the people towards this technology. Hopefully so. Thank you very much to everybody.